If someone handed you the key to unlock a portal to another world, would you use it even if there was a chance you might never come back? What if ancient knowledge lost to time could grant you access to the unknown? Today, we're diving into a story that challenges the limits of reality itself, a doorway in Peru said to connect our world to distant realms. Let's uncover the mystery of the Devil's Doorway and the unbelievable experience of those who dared to use it. Nestled in the rugged highlands near Lake Titicaca lies a mysterious rock formation known as Aramu Muru, or the Devil's Doorway. A carved doorway stands resolute in the middle of nowhere, whispering secrets of the past and inviting questions about the nature of reality itself. Legends claim this stone portal is no ordinary carving, but a gateway to other worlds. Tales of travelers vanishing and reappearing abound, some returning clad in ancient attire, their origins a mystery. Yet, few dare to approach the site, believing it to hold dangerous, otherworldly power. For Jerry and Kathy Wills, however, this mysterious doorway would become the site of a life-altering experience. Years before their encounter, Jerry visited the doorway during tours of Peru. Aymara guides shared local legends about the portal, leaving Jerry intrigued but skeptical. But it wasn't until meeting an Aymara shaman, Pedro, that Jerry began to glimpse the doorway's secrets. Pedro revealed that the portal could be activated by humming 3 specific tones. But he warned, you might go away and never return. Despite the danger, Jerry couldn't resist testing the truth of Pedro's words. His opportunity came on November 11, 1998, when he and Kathy led a small group to Aramu Muru at 11 p.m., a time steeped in symbolic significance. Kathy recounts how Jerry approached the stone. It was a moonlit night, and he knelt down, making tones I couldn't hear from where I was sitting, she said. What she saw next was unbelievable. He shimmered, vibrated, and then he was gone. Just like that. For Jerry, the experience was equally extraordinary. He recalls an overwhelming sense of falling before hurtling through the cosmos at unimaginable speed. Then, suddenly, he was standing in a vast white room, where a disembodied voice greeted him. They explained they were the creators of the doorway, Jerry said. It connects Earth to other locations and worlds using energy and resonance. The experience was like something out of science fiction, yet it was happening in real time. But his awe quickly turned to anxiety as he realized he didn't know how to return. Frantically, he followed the instructions given by the voice, focusing his mind and recreating the tones. Within moments, he was traveling again, rushing back to the doorway. Meanwhile, Kathy waited anxiously. I started to panic, thinking, what if he can't get back? She shared. But moments later, she saw Jerry reappear, shimmering back into existence. He stood up, looked at us, and said, well, I'm back. The group, stunned into silence, made their way back to their van. Nobody said a word the entire ride, Kathy recalls. It wasn't until they were alone in their hotel room that Jerry described what had happened, sharing details of the portal, the white room, and the incredible technology that made such a journey possible. Was Jerry's experience a glimpse into advanced ancient technology, a dimensional gateway, or something else entirely? Could this doorway connect not just distant locations, but other realms of existence? While skeptics might dismiss the tale as fantasy, those who've stood at Aramu Muru understand its eerie allure. For Jerry and Kathy, the Devil's Doorway will forever be a place where the impossible became reality.
The reason we were there is because, well, I'd been there a couple of times in years prior. Remember I was saying we were doing tours to Peru, and sometimes we go to Lake Titicaca. And one of the Aymara guides had shown me this place. It was in the middle of nowhere, just off of a highway that was rarely used except by large trucks transporting goods from Desaguadero, which is the southern port of entry for Peru, between Peru and Bolivia. So there were, there was just a scattering of Aymara who lived, through this region, but there wasn't very many people. Anyway, they showed it to me. I was fascinated by it. They were telling me fantastic stories about how people had disappeared into it, how they had seen people come out of it, and then walk back into it again. Sometimes they're dressed in the ancient attire of robes and headpiece and so forth. And then, you hear stories like this, and it's fascinating, and you don't know what to make of it, but still you listen because it's fascinating. If nothing else, it's their mythology and it's interesting. It was a few years after I had been there a couple of times already that I met up with a fellow near Machu Picchu in the village of Agua Caliente. It's a little village just below Machu Picchu. You go there before you go to Machu Picchu, actually. This fellow I met, his name was Pedro. He was an Aymara shaman, and at the time, I didn't know him from anyone. He was so insistent that he read my coca leaves that I finally acquiesced and allowed him to. Reading coca leaves is where they take all this big bag of coca leaves off the coca plant, mix them around, move the leaves, throw them in the air, let them land. They read them. It's kind of like reading tea leaves, I guess. Well, this fellow gave me a pretty interesting reading, saying things that were fantastic that I just didn't know how to get my mind around because at the time I didn't know Kathy. I was married to someone else, had my electronics business, was doing the touring thing as a side hobby, really. And he told me that my electronics business was going to die, that my marriage was going to come to an end, and that I was going to meet someone who had hair like gold and the heart of the United States, who was, as he said it, the one. And she would be the one that would make all the difference in what I do the rest of my life. Well, I'm telling you this backstory so you understand that these things did come to pass, and I had some respect for what he had to say past this point. We eventually became better friends on subsequent trips down to Peru, spent some time with him, and eventually got around to asking him some questions. I didn't want to do it immediately, because there's some things that they hold as secret. They don't tell outsiders. But because now we had become good friends, I asked him about this strange doorway. Since he's Aymara, he's from Lake Titicaca. Surely he knows of this place. And he said, yeah, he knows of it. And I'm paraphrasing. He said, there are people who use that doorway to go to other worlds, to other places. He says, I don't know. I've not really gone through it, but I've been there and seen it happen. Well, then how do they do this? Because it's just a rock. How do they do this? So he said, there are 3 tones. And he says, I'll tell you this, but you have to swear an oath to me that you won't tell anyone. So, of course, I did. If it's BS, then I've sworn an oath to not tell anybody BS. If it's true, well, even more so important that I've had this oath. So he told me there are 3 tones that these people used. And sometimes, once there was a musician who sat there and he was humming and he happened to hit those 3 tones accidentally and it just sucked him in and he was gone, never to be seen or heard from again. They considered it very dangerous business to mess with this thing, and they actually don't even like being around it. They call it the devil's doorway. So he told me the tones, and he says, you've got to be very careful with this, because if you decide that you're going to try to open this doorway, we don't know how it works. We don't know what will happen to you. You might go away and never come back. He seemed genuinely concerned. Well, of course, I'm curious, and not one to just believe that, yeah, this is a factual thing. I wanted to find out for myself. So I had, on that particular trip, I was going to Lake Titicaca, and I went to the doorway. I only made 2 of the tones. I didn't make 3 of them that time. And this overwhelming sense, it's like when you're dreaming that you're falling. This incredible sense of that overwhelmed me, and I pulled myself quickly away from the doorway and just got away from it. I needed to think this through, because how on earth could that happen? What is going on? By this time, I was with Kathy, and we were married. And I went with her on, what was it? I was like the end of November, November 11th, that's what it was. We went there at 11 o'clock at night. Everybody was hot after the 11, blah, blah, blah. So I thought, okay, well, maybe this is important. So we went there. Went there with a group of people who were our passengers. There was a small group, actually. I think it's probably four or five others besides Kathy and I. And the whole intent of going there that late at night was to make all three tones to see what would happen. And I'm a little apprehensive, but I figured, I really doubt anything is going to happen. So I got up there, and the overwhelming sense of dizziness and falling occurred, but I fought my way through it, kept focused, and kept making the three tones over and over and over until finally it felt as though it sucked me forward and I was just falling. Now, this is the point where Kathy was watching, and she could tell you what she saw, and I'll ask her to do that in just a moment. I was moving through what seemed to be the cosmos at an extraordinarily rapid rate. So fast, it just is mind-boggling. And within a very short time, I was deposited into a room, at least it seemed like a room, a quite large arena sort of place, that was all white. I couldn't tell floors from wall to ceiling. It was like being suspended in a bubble of white. Although I could stand on the floor, I could tell I was standing on something. And trying to get my wits about me, because this just didn't even seem possible. Within a short time, there was a sound of a man talking as though he were talking over an intercom system, and was apparently a bit surprised that I was there, asked me who I was, and I told him, and he welcomed me, surprisingly enough. I asked him who he was, and he said, well, we're the ones who constructed the doorway. And then went on to explain to me how they had made these doorways, and they interconnect through some means to other places on our planet, on Earth, and also to other worlds out there in the cosmos. And it sounds just like Stargate, so I apologize for that. But that's what he said. That's how this works. And that you make the tones, it turns on the energy by resonating the silica in the stone, and it interferes with the energy running through there naturally, which I presume is that it's on a ley line. It has a natural high potential. When you interfere with the electrical characteristics, that it sets something in motion, a bidirectional wormhole, perhaps, according to Dr. Michio Kaku, when I asked him about it. Well, and that sort of thing is possible, according to Kaku. So, who knows? Maybe that's what's happening. Well, it seemed like I couldn't keep track of time. I wasn't sure how long I had been gone. And I became quite concerned because, after all, it was after 11 o'clock at night, quite cold at Lake Titicaca, quite dark, quite remote. Kathy and the others are there. Here I am, God knows where. And I want to go back. I've had enough of this crap. So I made it quite clear that I was frantic and very worried. I needed to get back, and I needed to do it now. And so the fellow guided me in the steps necessary. And the next thing you know, I'm traveling again, almost with just a flash. I'm traveling through the cosmos at an incredibly crazy speed. And there's a sound like a dozen tires losing their air while this is taking place. And I could breathe quite normally. Well, the next thing you know, I'm back, but I'm looking through the doorway as though it were clear, but I can't get through it. It's as though it were glass. So I rationalized I probably need to use the tones again, put my head against the wall, made the tones over and over and over, and finally it acquiesced and allowed me through. It released me. I was blown away, and I was scared out of my mind. This totally freaked me out. I had no idea that there was such a thing possible. So, after gathering myself and gathering my wits, Kathy and I and the others who had seen this, we migrated back to the bus waiting for us, and it took us back to our hotel. And I really didn't talk about this very much for quite some time. I did talk to Kathy about it, of course, but uh, didn't really go into too much. It's such a fantastic story, but it happened to me, and I don't know how to validate it except say that, well, it happened. I don't know.
All right. Well, Jerry was easy to be seen because it was basically a full moon and or a very light with moon. I don't know if it was the full moon or not. So don't quote me on that. But it was a very light night, and he had a kind of a cream colored winter coat on, so he was easy to distinguish in the darker area there by the doorway. And he knelt down in it, and I was sitting probably, I don't know, about about 30 feet away from where he was, and he just started making his tones and things that he was doing with it, and I couldn't hear him making the tones, so I was that far away. But as after a few minutes, he started to shimmer, and then all of a sudden, he just kind of like just vibrated out. He was not there at all. And that was pretty stunning because it was just like, really? And I walked closer to the doorway and looked to see where he was, and he wasn't there. And so I went back and sat on the rock that I was sitting on, and just like was trying to get my wits about myself, thinking, okay, good, he went through the doorway, but what if he can't get back? You know, and so I started thinking about that because we just got married, and it was starting to get a little bit, feeling a little bit nervous about the whole situation, like, starting to panic a little bit about it. Well, we were there around 11 o'clock, between 10:30 and 11, I think it was, that he was doing this. We never stayed there past midnight because it just gets too cold. But, we spend a couple hours there. So then, as fast as I'm trying to like collect myself and rubbing my eyes and looking at the doorway, then he started shimmering back into place. And he kind of stood up and fell backward and stood up and looked around and looked up and looked at us and said, well, I'm back. And we go, yeah. And he goes, okay, let's go. And so everybody just kind of gathered their things and left and didn't say a word to each other. It was really strange. It wasn't more than 5 minutes. I'd say, 2 or 3 minutes, because it wasn't that long. Well, he was kind of shaken to the point of just not wanting to talk about it. Because we were walking, you had to walk across this plowed field over to the van far down to the road, because it isn't as convenient to get there today as it was back then. But as we were walking across this plowed field, I said, Jerry, you disappeared. He says, yeah, I know. And I go, what happened? He goes, I can't talk about it right now. And I go, okay. And so it was a 45-minute bus ride or van ride back to our hotel, and nobody said a word the whole time. When we got back to the hotel room, he just started just regurgitating. I wish I would have had a recorder. He just started regurgitating all this information about where he was, what he saw, and all this different stuff. And it was amazing. And he had told you some of the things about how, he focused on, his intention was to go to the Creator, and he ended up in this white room, lack of better description, and had a conversation with this voice. So, but I definitely saw him disappear and reappear.
What lies beyond? Perhaps the next traveler bold enough to hum its tones will find out. So, what do you think? Would you step through the portal if given the chance, knowing you might never return? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this journey into the extraordinary, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss out on the wild and unexpected stories we explore here on Quantum Trails. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more adventures beyond the boundaries of the normal. And remember, have faith, believe, and you will achieve.